What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be finishing up our initial rankings for your 2025 Redraft Fantasy Football Leagues. We've already done the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the running backs up to this point, but today, we're doing my top 24 tight ends for those redraft formats. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. You don't want to miss any future content when we do put that out over the next couple of weeks as we lead up to the NFL season. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these tight ends. All right, so as you can see, I got 7 tiers pulled up today, labeled for you guys to kind of tell you how I view these players in these tiers. We're going to be going through starting at tier 1, and tier 1 is those elite tight ends for fantasy football. My number 1 overall guy should be no surprise. It's Brock Bowers of the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, this is a player who set the rookie tight end record with 112 catches and finished as the tight end 1 overall last year as a rookie. Only 6 targets of his came inside of the 10-yard line, which means that there's still some major touchdown upside that is still untapped for Brock Bowers. And I think he's the clear alpha in the passing game here for the Las Vegas Raiders, despite some other solid wide receivers being on the team with Jack Bech and Jacoby Myers. But I do think that he gets a quarterback upgrade here this year with Geno Smith, and it should be back to business for Brock Bowers. Now, coming in at my tight end 2, this also shouldn't be a surprise. It's Trey McBride for the Arizona Cardinals. This is a player who finished as the tight end 3 in 2024 with 111 receptions and over 1,100 receiving yards, and he only had 2 touchdowns on the season. So still some untapped touchdown potential. Like I said with Brock Bowers, he has massive breakout potential, especially if those touchdowns do come his way here in 2025. And I think he really has a true shot at challenging Brock Bowers as the tight end 1 here during the 2025 season. This is a player who has an elite volume role, and I think it makes him one of the safest bets at the tight end position. And then my final player coming in here at the elite tight end slot, it's going to be number 3, George Kittle for the San Francisco 49ers. This is a player who was the tight end 2 last year, despite a very banged up supporting cast here in San Francisco. He had the highest yardage that he's ever had since 2018, so it's been a long time, but he had one of the best years of recent memory for George Kittle. And with Deebo Samuel gone and Ayuk recovering from that injury that he suffered last season, I do think that Kittle should remain Brock Purdy's top target. He's still a player that I think is a weekly top 5 tight end. He has big game upside, obviously touchdown upside as well, and he's cheaper than the other 2 tight ends available in the middle rounds of drafts most of the time. So still somebody I think is a very elite tight end option and probably the most affordable option here in this grouping. Let's move on to my tier 2. Tier 2 is those safe tight end ones. Coming in at number 4 for me is going to be TJ Hockenson of the Minnesota Vikings. This is a player who didn't play last year until week 9 of the 24 season. He was inconsistent as a producer last year behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And I think a lot of that was because of he was recovering from the injury and he had that target competition as well. Now, obviously the ceiling of TJ Hockenson is going to be tied to how well not rookie quarterback, I guess second year quarterback, but his first starting opportunity here in the NFL of JJ McCarthy and how he develops for the Minnesota Vikings. But I still think that TJ Hockenson has a safe tight end 1 floor, probably going to be limited as a week winning option just because of some of the other target competition that these guys above him don't have. But he's still a player that I think is going to be very, very good for you. And if Jordan Addison misses time because of suspension or Justin Jefferson misses time because of injury or anything like that, TJ Hockenson is going to have an elite ceiling. It's just going to take an injury for him to be that number 2 receiving option. Let's move on to my tight end 5. This is where I'm going to put Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a down year, quote unquote down year last year for the Kansas City Chiefs, but he still finished as the tight end 6 in fantasy football. He's never finished worse than the tight end 8 ever as a starter for the Chiefs, and he had 133 targets last season, but a career low in touchdowns. So he is a player that I think could be a bounce back candidate if the touchdowns kind of go back his way here in 2025. And even though he's going to be 35 years old, I think he is still a very reliable weekly starter that still has top 5 weekly potential every single week. Let's go to my next player in this tier and the last player in this tier. It's going to be Sam LaPorta of the Detroit Lions. This is a player that saw some regression in year 2 of his career. He regressed from the tight end 1 to the tight end 7 in 2024. Still productive, but he was very inconsistent for fantasy football. He has lots of target competition as well, just like TJ Hockenson. He has Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, and you could even say that that target competition, when you account for the running back back room with Gibbs is even tougher than the competition that Hockenson sees. So I would be expecting inconsistency, some ups and downs from a guy like Sam LaPorta, but he is fairly priced in drafts at this moment in time. So still a good option to plug and play and get those spike weeks out of a really good Detroit Lions offense. Moving on to tier 3, going to my solid tight end ones, coming in at number 7, it's David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns. This is a player who averages 5 catches and 50 yards over the last 3 seasons. The QB situation is still very murky. It's very much a mess, and I do expect him to probably start out with Joe Flacco, but he may be catching passes from rookies later in the year, whether that be Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel. Now, he's a player that I think is probably a low-end tight end 1, but he did flash some strong chemistry with Flacco in 2023 for a stretch. So if Flacco, for some reason, is the full year starter for the Cleveland Browns, I don't foresee that happening, but if he is, this could be a very solid season from David Njoku. Let's go to the next player. It's going to be Evan Engram coming in at my tight end 8. This is a player who's now on the Denver Broncos, moving from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He caught 114 balls in 2023, but he dipped to 5.8 catches per game in 2024 due to an injury that he suffered. Now, he joined Sean Payton's offense with unclear competition behind Courtland Sutton, so there is room for some volume in this offense. I think because of that, he's probably going to be a volume-dependent option with boom-bust potential depending on how Sean Payton decides to use him. Let's move on to the next guy. Coming in at tight end 9, it's going to be Tucker Kraft for the Green Bay Packers. This is a player who finished as the tight end 9 in 2024 with 700 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns, and he was a player that we all picked up off of the waiver wire. He's one of those waiver wire gems of last year. He has elite yards after the catch skills, averaged 8.8 yards after the catch per reception, and I do expect that to probably regress a little bit here in 2025. This is a player who's probably going to get some low volume. They did add additional receiver talent in Matthew Golden, and last year he only averaged 2.9 catches per game, so he's probably going to be a guy that's a little bit more boom or bust, probably a touchdown dependent option and a big play type of guy if that yak continues. Let's go to the final player in this tier. For me, it's going to be tight end number 10, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. This is a player who scored 11 touchdowns last year despite just seeing 3.2 receptions per game in 2024. I do think that there is some risk for him to see some of that touchdown regression, but he is the primary red zone target for them outside of Derrick Henry running the football. So there is a chance for some regression, but he is still a primary target in that area. Because of that, he's going to be also a boom bust option and probably a riskier draft pick, but I still think that Mark Andrews can be a top 10 tight end for us in fantasy football. I just don't know if he has that top 5 potential anymore, and I really don't think that that's even in the range of outcomes. Let's go to tier 4. Tier 4 is those fringe tight end ones. Coming in at 11 for me, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. This is a player who averaged 6 targets per game last year, and he only played on 66% of the snaps for the Buffalo Bills. Now, injuries probably played a little bit of a role in that, but the usage wasn't elite for him either, even when he was healthy on the football field. So the Bills, they may be rotating tight ends, they may be rotating some wide receivers under Joe Brady this year, and that probably makes him a fringe tight end 1 unless we see that usage and those snaps come up. But still, one of the most talented tight ends, I think, in football. He's just not being used properly by this Bills offense. Let's go to tight end 12. For me, it's going to be Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. This is a player who was on pace for 800 plus yards before Dak's injury there last year, and it did kind of tank the entire Cowboys offense when Dak got hurt. Now, also keep in mind, Ferguson was injured at the beginning of the year as well. He only had 1 touchdown in 2024 after scoring 5 touchdowns the year before. So I think this is a player who is a sneaky late round bounce back type of candidate. With Dak Prescott healthy again, you just have to remember that they brought in some extra target competition in George Pickens, so there is some extra competition there for some targets. Let's go to my tight end 13. It's going to be Mike Gesicki for the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a player who averaged 9 targets per game when T. Higgins was off of the football field in 2024, and just 5.6 targets per game when T. Higgins was healthy. So this is a player that acted as Joe Burrow's slot guy. I think he has more value if Chase or Higgins were to miss time, and let's be honest, Higgins has missed time quite often throughout his NFL career. So that kind of puts him on this fringe territory for me, maybe a deeper dart throw that has some upside in this offense that's going to be passing the football a lot, and probably a guy that you definitely want to be plugging into the starting lineup if there were some injuries to this Bengals offense. And let's go to my last player in this fringe tight end spot. I'm going to be talking about Jonnu Smith now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a player who finished as the tight end 4 in 2024. He had career highs across the board for him statistically. He's now in Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith again. We've seen this before with Arthur Smith and Jonnu Smith, so that's going to be an interesting thing to see how this pans out. out, especially with Pat Freiermuth still in the mix in this tight end room, who I still think is a talented tight end in himself, but he's a fringe tight end one for me with some yak upside in this offense. But I do think the offense is going to be very unpredictable here in Pittsburgh under Aaron Rodgers, Arthur Smith, and all of those other guys. So let's move on to the upside tight ends here as options for you later in drafts. I do think coming in at 15 for me should be Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. This is still a player who has been insanely talented, but he is very, very unreliable for fantasy at this point in his career. He's finally priced, though, pretty correctly outside of the top 12 tight ends in fantasy drafts. So if you were ever going to invest in the talent of Kyle Pitts, probably this year is the year, because the ADP is actually suppressed for the first time pretty much ever for Kyle Pitts. So he's going to be a player that I think is a boom bust streaming option, but not a trustworthy weekly starter for you unless something happens where he gets traded or one of those receiving options gets injured. Moving on to my tight end 16 here. This is where I'm going to put Tyler Warren, rookie tight end for the Indianapolis Colts. He is a very versatile type of role player when he was coming out of Penn State, a player that played in the slot, in line, out of the backfield, in the wildcat. They used him all over the football field, and it's really unclear right now the quarterback situation in Indianapolis and really how that's going to affect his year one production. But I do think this is a longer term bet for you, probably a deep sleeper in redraft who has second half potential as he acclimates to the NFL game. Moving on to the next guy, my tight end 17 is the other rookie tight end, Colston Loveland for the Chicago Bears. This is a player who also has a lot of target competition. He's going to be competing with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, and other guys in this crowded Bears offense. Now, obviously with rookie tight ends, there's always lots of uncertainty, but Ben Johnson's system could elevate him the way that he did Sam LaPorta as a rookie there for the Detroit Lions. So I think Colston Loveland is a very worthy late round stash for you in those redraft leagues with some breakout potential here in 2025. Now, going on to my last player as an upside tight end, I do want to talk about Isaiah Likely for the Baltimore Ravens. This is a player who averaged 11 half PPR points in 9 games without Mark Andrews throughout his career. I really don't think that Isaiah Likely is draftable unless Mark Andrews gets hurt or is traded. We've heard some trade rumors for Mark Andrews, but I do think that Isaiah Likely has tight end one upside in the case that Mark Andrews is not on the football field for the Ravens. So you may start seeing Isaiah Likely eat into Mark Andrews' workload this year regardless, but I do think he's a player that's probably not as draftable as people want him to be, despite that week 1 breakout last year that kind of faded away throughout the rest of the year. But Mark Andrews is still the tight end to own here in Baltimore, in my opinion. So let's go on to tier 6. I'm going to call these the boring floor plays, and I really didn't have a better name for it than that, but that's kind of what they are. Coming in for me as tight end 19, it's Dallas Goedert for the Philadelphia Eagles. There were some trade rumors this offseason. Those have all been squashed pretty much after we had a contract restructure from Dallas Goedert. So he is going to be staying in this offense here in Philly that is very crowded with Saquon, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, AJ Brown. Lots of options here for the Philadelphia Eagles to spread their offense around. So because of that, he's probably going to be a player that's very untrustworthy from a week-by-week basis, but he is going to be very viable as a starting option if there was some wide receiver injuries or something like that, and he still has spike week potential in one of the league's best offenses. Let's go to the second player in this tier. It's going to be tight end 20, Hunter Henry for the New England Patriots. Like I said, safe, boring floor, probably 400 to 600 yards and a few touchdowns here in this offense for the Patriots. I think he's a guy that you can plug in as a streaming option during bye weeks, during injuries, but he's definitely not a player that you're going to start every single week, and definitely not a league winner for fantasy football leagues. So player that probably has a low ceiling, meh floor, very boring. But Hunter Henry is probably inevitable. He's going to be in your lineup at least once or twice a year, just based off of those variables that we talked about. So coming in the last player in this tier, tight end 21, it's going to be Zach Ertz for me for the Washington Commanders. This is a player who finished as the tight end 8 last year with 91 targets from Jaden Daniels. He followed Cliff Kingsbury to Washington, but the problem is now they have Deebo Samuel in this offense, and I do think that's going to take some of those targets away from Zach Ertz. Plus, he's 34 years old. You have to think that ceiling and the age is going to start, affecting Zach Ertz overall. So because of that, I'd probably call him a safe floor play in this offense, but the ceiling is very unpredictable and probably not somebody I'm targeting in my drafts unless I'm getting him very, very cheap. And I needed to draft 2 tight ends because I don't have a reliable one to start the season off. Let's go to my final tier of tight ends here. We're going to tier 7, and those are going to be players that I think are worthy of early season stashes. I don't necessarily view them as week 1 starters for us, us for fantasy football, but you could put them on the bench if you have the bench space and see what happens over the first month of the season if you are in a tight end premium league or something like that. So coming in at my number 22 tight end, it is going to be Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is in line to start now for the Jags with Evan Engram gone out of town. He's obviously going to be competing with Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter for targets in this offense, so that is going to make him a little bit risky. He's probably a streamer candidate if you have injuries, if you have bye weeks, but he should have some upside if there was ever an injury to BTJ or Travis Hunter, because I do think he's talented as a player. He just needs some more opportunities. Let's go to the next guy. It's going to be tight end 23. That's Mason Taylor, the rookie tight end for the New York Jets. He was a second round rookie pick with every down opportunity here for the New York Jets as a rookie. Obviously, the receiving core outside of Garrett Wilson is a bunch of guys that are really unproven and haven't shown us anything throughout the majority of their NFL career. Now, the college production from Mason Taylor was pretty low, but he does have strong draft capital that I think is a reliable metric to use when you're trying to predict breakouts from the tight end position. He's a player that I would have on my watch list, a stash candidate for me. Maybe you're not even drafting him, but after the draft, you put him on that watch list for you as a potential waiver wire priority pick. But I would be ready to pivot to him early on, especially if he starts seeing targets right out of the gate. And now my last and final player, just creeping into my top 24, it's going to be Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a player who flashed huge upside last year during weeks 7 through 10 during the 2024 season, but regression is very likely to come his way here this year because he's going to be the fourth or the fifth option in the passing game behind guys like Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka, Chris Godwin, maybe even Jalen McMillan. If you want to put Bucky Irving in there too, maybe even Bucky Irving. There's lots of talent on this offense, and Cade Otton is just not going to be high in that pecking order. So he probably needs multiple injuries for him to be relevant, but if that happens, volume should come his way again, and then we've seen the talent of Cade Otton, but he's just a very unreliable player at the start of the season when guys are going to be healthy. Maybe just see what happens with Chris Godwin if he's ready for week 1. Maybe he's not, but that is my top 24 tight ends for redraft at this moment in time. All right, there you have it. So if you enjoyed today's video, you found something actionable, entertaining, informative, make sure to do me a favor and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. If this is your first time here, or you've been watching the channel in the shadows and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, go do me a favor too, hit that subscribe button. We want you around all year long to help you guys try and win those fantasy football championships during the 2025 season. And last but not least, make sure you guys go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams 24/7, 365, a dope group of people in that community that want to talk ball with you all the time. So like I said, it's free to join. There is no risk in doing that. But with all of that out of the way, I have nothing else for you guys today. So I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.